Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to thank the senator from Connecticut, and I too join him in being very proud, as we were a year ago, to see Congress stand with families across the country who did not want to see their health care rolled back. A year ago, as he said, President Trump tried to make good on his campaign promise to repeal the Affordable Care Act and jeopardize health care for millions of people. A year ago, the president tried to jam Trumpcare through Congress. It was a harmful, mean-spirited bill that would have spiked premiums and gutted Medicaid and scrapped protections for people with pre-existing conditions, which would put families back at the mercy of big insurance companies. But people across the country stood up, they spoke out, and they made it absolutely clear they did not want President Trump to take away their health care or give power back to those insurance companies. And during that debate, I heard personal stories from patients and families all over my state of Washington who were concerned about Trumpcare because it would make them harder to get the care they needed. I heard stories like Julie's. Julie has a genetic condition, and as a result of that, she has had four different types of cancer. She has had 4 different organs removed during treatment, and she has had her diet severely restricted and her life dramatically changed. But she is a fighter, and she had excellent care, and she ultimately won each of those 4 battles with cancer. However, without protections for people with pre-existing conditions, her health care costs could skyrocket. If President Trump had his way, Julie could not get the care she needed. And by the way, she's not the only one. I heard from families like a woman named Vanessa. When Vanessa was pregnant, she learned her daughter would be born with significant health challenges. In fact, her daughter Cheyenne had her first surgery when she was just 20 days old. She would have 2 more before her very first birthday. Even though Cheyenne was born with pre-existing conditions that will be costly to treat for years to come, Vanessa, her mom, was able to get insurance through our state exchange and get her daughter the care that she needed. But if President Trump had his way, that might not be possible. Last year, in the midst of the Trumpcare debate, I shared Vanessa's story and Julie's story and many stories from families in Washington state, and I even heard more that I'd love to share. And people in other states across the country were also reaching out, letting their senators know how damaging Trumpcare would be for their families and urging them to vote against it. And it worked. Last year, we came together and gave President Trump's health care repeal scheme a big thumbs down. Unfortunately, that has not stopped President Trump from doing everything he can to sabotage families' health care from the Oval Office. When he couldn't jam through Trumpcare, instead he jammed through a partisan tax bill that gave cuts to big insurance companies and drug companies and paid for them with steps even his former health security secretary confessed would drive up families' premiums. He slashed investments that help people understand their health care options and get covered. He handed power back to the insurance companies by expanding loopholes for junk plans and making it easier to ignore patient protections, including protections, by the way, for women, for seniors, and for people with pre-existing conditions. The Trump administration is even refusing to defend pre-existing protections in court, both abandoning its duty to defend the law and ignoring the will of the people across the country who want them to fight for these protections. While President Trump has broken a lot of promises, it's clear he has never wavered in his promise to undermine health care for our families. And he has never failed to put insurance companies ahead of patients, which is why his decision to nominate Judge Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court is such an alarming omen for families' health care. As a candidate, President Trump left no question he would nominate far-right Supreme Court judges who would strike down the Affordable Care Act and jeopardize care for millions of families. And to be sure, candidates met that extreme ideological standard. He had them vetted by extreme ideological conservative groups. We know President Trump chose Judge Kavanaugh because he has no doubt Kavanaugh will support his efforts to sabotage families' health care and make it harder for people to get the care they need. We know pre-existing condition protections are on the line. We know stopping Kavanaugh's confirmation isn't a matter of partisan politics. For many families in our country, it's a matter of life and death. And we know we can stop it if people across the country do exactly what they did to beat Trumpcare. Stand up, speak out, make clear that families who didn't want their health care stripped away last year don't want it stripped away this year either. I have heard from so many families concerned about this, and I know others are sharing their stories as well. So I hope our Republican colleagues are listening even more closely than they were last year, and that more of them will join us on the side of patients and families, not the president on the side of insurance companies. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.